Welcome to our episode of Reach Minds, Thoughts for Your Life's Journey podcast. In this episode, we will be exploring how to navigate your career, to find your purpose, making a meaningful contribution, and having a lasting impact. Today, I'm joined by Jignasha Kanani, where we'll discuss her strategies of how she aligned her career to her personal goals and values, ensuring that her work is not only a source of income, very important, and also a fulfilling career. Jag has worked for over 20 years in commercial banking, in Barclays and Lloyds banking. Jag has been recognized both internally and externally for her work on DEI, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity. Most recently, she was named as the Empower Future Leader of 2024. Welcome, Jag.
Thank you so much for having me, Nita.
Well, tell me a little bit about what got you interested in banking.
So I actually come from a family of bankers. So both my parents were bankers. And actually, although I didn't know that I wanted to work in a bank per se very young, I knew I wanted to work in the city. It was very exciting. And watching back in the sort of early 90s, watching these glamorized American TV shows where bankers were they kicked ass and all this kind of thing. I found it very exciting. But actually, as I sort of progressed through my education and it was time to choose what to do at university, I did financial economics and I worked in a branch part-time whilst I did that. And actually, I found that banking was a surprisingly creative industry and you got to meet lots of different people. And I felt a natural alignment actually when I started working with colleagues and the customers that I did, and I've just sort of transitioned my career from there. But my parents were a big inspiration.
So tell me in what way your parents were a big inspiration as a South Asian woman?
Yes. So my parents, they came here with my grandparents in sort of the 1970s. My mum, back in those days, you sort of met the person that's going to be hiring you and they'd offer you the role. But my mum always found her role particularly invigorating. She was really good at it. She worked in the branch for over 40 years. And she always came back with stories of how she'd helped somebody, whether that was meeting a need or helping them order a new debit card, whatever it was, that was her way of helping the wider community. My dad was more in the sort of the corporate finance space, and he would tell stories of how he'd helped businesses achieve their aspirations. And for me, it was very inspiring hearing those stories of how my parents had had such an impact on the people they were working with as well.
Great. That sounds as if you were set up to go into banking.
Well, it definitely helped them having their experience, but of course they had joined those careers when they were very new to the country, and they'd really had to work hard to get to the positions that they've got to, and sharing some of their stories and having that almost reality check that actually you are going to face challenges, you're going to have to overcome difficult situations. Actually, that was really helpful, and it's become more and more helpful as I've progressed through my career.
What kind of challenges did they share with you that has kind of helped you to have a positive impact on your career and working with others?
Well, from my mum's perspective, she worked pretty much full time so I've got a younger brother, younger sister, and after my brother went to school, she went back to working full time. So she was managing household, she had a full-time job, and she was also sort of looking after us three, helping us with our homework and stuff, because my dad had a very demanding role and he was working very, very long hours. So in terms of those challenges, actually how she managed to balance looking after the home and have a very fulfilling career. She did that extremely well. She appeared at that time as if she didn't break a sweat, but it is a challenge. And as children, we appreciated what she did for us at the time, and she was always present as well. And in terms of my dad, he's shared stories of how he's had to overcome barriers in his career, particularly weaving through corporate banking, where the scene is very different to what my mum had within the retail bank. Working in corporate banking was very different. Your image, your accent, everything really matters because you're put in front of some very senior clients. And he shared scenarios where he has faced racism. He has lost out on opportunity purely because of the colour of his skin.
So kind of building on that, what kind of challenges have you had to overcome working in the world of banking?
I think for me, it was around, I've held roles where there isn't a great level of representation, both for female, but also for sort of minority ethnic colleagues. And the challenge there has been where you don't see yourself represented. So you find it difficult to see a future for yourself there. And almost you're trying to fit in. So you feel like you can't bring your whole self to work. So I often felt, particularly in my younger days, that I was almost playing a role, like I was hiding parts of myself because I needed to fit in with those around me in order to be able to progress. So that was one challenge. And other challenges include sort of having to unlearn some of the things that we're taught as children culturally. Being a South Asian female, you're taught that you're a caregiver. You do things for others. You don't tend to do things for yourself. And in terms of the relationship we have with elders, we listen to them. We don't challenge them. We do as we're told, but actually those lessons, whilst they're teaching respect and they're teaching you to absorb the learnings that your elders give in a corporate environment, that doesn't really play out when you're in committees and meetings and you have to hold your own opinion and you have to challenge. So it's unlearning some of those things actually to overcome and progress in the career.
And how did you do that? Because you're saying there are systemic barriers within the organization and a lack of role models for you. Nobody looked like you. That's on one hand. Then on the other hand, you've got these maybe ideas that were probably passed on to you without being told that, hey, you need to be a caregiver. What was your journey like to kind of undo some of that?
I suppose it's difficult because you don't know what you need to undo because you don't know any different, do you? So I think for me, it took actually having line managers that were really supportive. They could see that although I was very good at my job, I had almost like a reticence to speak in meetings. And the first line manager that I had that actually spotted this, they took me aside and said, "What is it that stops you speaking in front of these meetings? Because I know that what you're talking about. So why don't you do that in the meeting?" And we sort of slowly unpacked that it was a confidence issue. And it was an issue that I felt like I couldn't challenge because there would be retribution. And it was them actually helping me with strategies to help build my confidence to openly. First, we started with speaking out in meetings. So having a look at the agenda in advance, which are the things that matter, where do you think you can contribute? And then if they were in the meeting, they would pave a way for me to, if I was in the meeting on my own, I would have a focus on this is the agenda item I want to talk about and making a point to talk about it. I found it incredibly difficult to start with. I felt very uncomfortable. I was painfully shy as a child, and I didn't like speaking to people in public. And so there was a facet of my personality in there as well. But actually, that perseverance, and when you've done it a couple of times, your confidence builds. So that was some of the things that really helped me in terms of unlearning those cultural barriers.
So what's been the positive impact of your career, having developed yourself and have had allies who championed you?
I think for me, it's that recognition that I'm probably not the only person that's felt this way. And thinking back to when I was in those situations, what would have really helped me? And I tried to be the person that I didn't have then. So being part of Reach, so Lloyds Employee Resource Group, is a really powerful way for me to be present in that space. So I've used my experience, how I've overcome those challenges, the techniques those line managers used for me. I try and employ those with the people that I'm mentoring. I talk about them when we have events, and just really showing my own journey, my own vulnerabilities, so people know that I've been through that journey, I've overcome it, and it gives them a way to overcome their challenges as well.
So has that been the impetus for you to get involved in ERG work and in DEI work?
Yeah, so I mean, up until now, I've had sort of very traditional business banking roles, so relationship management, being a credit officer, and I'm relatively new to the people space actually. So only sort of 2 years in out of a 20 plus year career. And the impetus for that was that I realized that actually all the roles that I've held in my career have always had some element of making a difference and helping others. And I did a lot of work at the side of the desk around trying to create that inclusive environment, having a space for people to talk about how they're feeling, how they need support. And for me, I wanted to transition into a role that allowed me to do that full time and allowed me to have the impact. Being part of the ERG, where I was in teams where I didn't see myself represented, or I was in a real minority, actually being part of the ERG meant that I was in a place with people that looked and sounded like me and had similar challenges. So I felt very safe in that space. And actually taking a leading role in the ERG means that we can take that population and help them along their journeys by sharing the challenges that we've overcome.
And how many people are part of the ERGs?
We have lots of main ERGs which cover all strands of diversity, but we also have lots of local groups as well. And we're looking to do more as an organisation to help link those groups up. But in terms of, I guess, the official membership of our ERG, it's probably around sort of 5,000 colleagues. But unofficially, it could be a lot more because we get a lot of different people that do come to our events.
And now you're a very active member of the ERG.
Yes.
And you sort of lead it in terms of bringing different topics and different presenters to it.
Yeah, so I head up the events stream of Reach Network, and that means that throughout the year we will invite speakers, we will host events, and they will typically be centered around cultural activity that might be happening throughout the year, but also around topics such as career confidence. We recently celebrated South Asian Heritage Month, East and Southeast Heritage Month, all those types of things. Within Reach, we do have faith networks that sit within it, and the faith networks will focus on the religious events and activities.
I just want to kind of circle back to when you were talking earlier around your South Asian culture. And I'm kind of thinking, how do you think culture and society plays in shaping how we show up, whether it's in the work or whether it's within our home?
I think it's difficult. I think we're evolving. And I think I'm part of the generation where it's starting to shift. I think in the generation sort of before mine and of my parents, there was very clear defined roles and expectations of this is what you do for your family, and you go to work, you're the breadwinner, and you're grateful for the job that you have. You show up in every way possible. There are great things that we have about our culture. We tend to have a very strong work ethic. We're very reliable. We work hard. But equally, we've got some of the things I spoke about earlier where you don't challenge elders. You don't necessarily ask for what you should be asking for because you're taught to be grateful to, oh, you work for such a great big organization. Don't rock the boat by asking for more money, for example. That wouldn't cross other cultures, other facets of society, wouldn't cross their mind not to ask for what you're due. So I think society does play a big role. We're still very thoughtful about what other people think about us, and our behaviors are, in a good way, you're kept in check because you should be behaving in a way that is true and honest and authentic. But equally, I can see how that stops people going into a direction that they're really passionate about, for example. I mean, I'm of the generation where everybody was a doctor, a lawyer, a banker, an accountant, something like that. But as we move towards my kids' generation, I'm very open about the fact that, look, you go off and do whatever you want to do, whatever passion you have, go off and do that. I'm seeing that more of that alignment between what you care about and what you do, because you want to do the right thing, but also make sure that you're doing something that drives you. Whereas before, it was you're earning to provide financial stability. And that's probably an overhang of when my grandparents moved here and they didn't have financial stability. So that sort of goes down through the generations as well.
Talking as a South Asian woman, what occurs to me is, without getting trapped into stereotypes,
Yes.
I think there must be a spectrum of how South Asian individuals and women show up. And some might be aligned to what you're talking about, and others may be at different ends of it. Because there is a danger of having a single story that says of course we've had our hardships and we probably had barriers both on gender and race. However, we might have had different ways of dealing with it and different family background that's helped us to deal with it. So I'm quite conscious that your experience is beautiful in terms of what helped you to navigate. I want to be able to say to the listeners that we're a spectrum. And it is not just one end of it. There are women, South Asian women that I've known who speak up, who go in and hit the ground running, and they strive towards whatever they want. And that might be to do with personality, might be to do with the confidence. So I just wanted to kind of frame that. And I'm sure in your ERG, the complexity of and the dialogue that you must have around that, I wish I was a fly on the wall, because not everybody they have common experiences. However, everybody has their own thoughts and perspective. How do you in the ERG manage that, some of the complexity that must arise in your groups?
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely valid point, and it is important to say that there isn't, in order to avoid casting a stereotype in what we're talking about, there is of course a spectrum of different ways, different personalities, and you don't want to be focused on a single story. The way that we sort of look at it in the ERG is that we try and make sure we have as much representation as possible. So if we have somebody who has been on a similar journey to mine, for example, we'll have them represented, but also somebody who's got a completely different story, a different perspective, and we bring those people together to have that rich discussion. So it is very visible that there are facets and there are different personalities, there are different experiences, and we take the best of that. We let people discuss it. We have very active audiences who can ask questions. We use the chat functions when we do virtual events, but it's really important to us that we get that balanced viewpoint across, because our audience, we've actually very actively tried to ensure that we have a very mixed audience, in that we have members, but we also encourage our members to bring along allies, line managers, things like that, so that it's no good everybody being on the same page talking about the same thing over and over again. We need allies to be able to move forward. So it's very important that we get that balanced viewpoint for the audience.
So what's next for you?
I'm very driven by making that difference for others, right? So, and I feel like I'm in a space now where I can be authentically me, and I try and role model that in the things that I say and that I do. In terms of what's next, I'd like to do more sort of externally, speaking to people in different organizations and trying to create that safe space, that place where people can see themselves, they can hear those inspiring stories. And by connecting people together, for me, that's a real driver. If I can help break down those barriers within the organization and start doing it outside, I'd consider that a win.
So just finally, if you had to give some tips to someone who's starting their career, not in banking, anywhere, what kind of advice or insights would you give them?
I would say that although we have ideas of where we think we want to be, actually embrace every opportunity that does come to you, even if it feels like it's not the right opportunity at the time, or that you've missed out on something that you really wanted. Actually, there is a bigger picture. And if you approach a situation honestly and with good intent that you're going to learn everything you can from it, that experience will help you move forward in the way that you do. And also have trust in yourself and your own abilities. It's sometimes such a difficult thing to do, especially when you're in an environment that may not be very inclusive and you feel like you are different. It's really important to hold on to the fact that you've earned your place there. Be confident in what you're doing, and don't be afraid to ask for support and ask for help when you need it.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed listening to your story and listening to how you've grown and evolved yourself into the person you are today and the impact and difference that you're making.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoy listening, tell a friend.